One, two, one, two. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, thank you very much, Angela, Bakshar, and Marina. And thank you, obviously, to the University of Cambridge for agreeing to put this on. I'm Rotimi Akinsete. I'm a therapist. I've also as well worked in higher education for over 25 years at the University of Greenwich, University of Surrey, University of the Arts London, and most latterly at the University of Oxford in student support roles rather than as an academic. I devised this Black Man on the Couch about 12 years ago. 12 years ago? 22 years ago now, actually. I'm getting old. After I completed my master's and found that black men were not accessing university counselling services. So I thought, why not put on a product like this and invite them to events like this to hear stories like from our guests today that might inspire them to seek support as and when needed. Without further ado, let's just get on, given that we're running late. So my very first guest is Lord Simon Woolley. Now, Simon Woolley, even before today, you're very much an inspiration to many people outside the university and of course within the university. I came across you during your work in Operation Black Vote. And I remember when you first wrote your book, you went to Beacon Bookshop in North London and you went there to go and do a book signing. And my sister lives just around the corner from there. And I rang up very quickly and says, look, Lord Wooley's just over there. Please go over there, get a book, get him to sign it. And so she did, Julie, as a little sister normally does when I ask her to do things. And this is the book. And thankfully, Lord Wooley, you signed in here. And my sister did say to you, look, my brother, he's running this thing called Black Man on the Couch. Would you be interested in attending? And you said yes straight away, which is fantastic because normally what happens is, and I've written to virtually every single black male celebrity in this country and asked them if they're willing to, seriously, if they're willing to attend, and the vast majority of them are like, good idea, nope. But Lord Wooley said yes straight away. So here we are so many months later, so thank you very much for that. Now, normally, and when I first devised this, I did want to try and have counselling sessions on stage, but that's virtually impossible because they are normally private matters. But what we will do is we'll have a discussion, there'll be some counselling type questions. Of course, things won't be confidential because, well, we've got people here and listening across the world, hopefully. So, you know, we'll just have a conversation. What I tend to do is I'll ask one pre-planned question and then we'll go and have conversations from there. And the planned question I'd like to ask you first, if I may, is you shared some of your challenges relating to diversity and inclusion in your book, SOAR, and it's obvious that leading a prestigious institution like Homerton College and also being a member of House of Lords must come with unique challenges and opportunities. Can you share some of your experiences in addressing diversity and inclusion within those settings and how these efforts are impacted on your own mental health and the well-being of black men in academia and in political settings? Sorry, long-winded, but I hope you got all of that.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, so over to you.
I first want to say thank you to you. But by the way, can you hear me?
Can you hear me online?
Yeah.
No.
This side. Is that better? That's better. That's better. I want to praise you first and foremost. I've spent 30 years being an activist, believing that I can get things done, believing I can make a difference along with others. And I want to pay tribute to you for bringing this to us. I mean, it's your idea, but you took that idea and made it happen. And so when your sister said to me, you know, would I do this? Of course I want to say yes, because I recognize a fellow activist that has the audacity, if you like, to believe that they can make a difference that not only benefits people like you and me, that look like you and me, but wider society.
No, thank you for that.
But to your question, I think that having that audacity, that self-belief and collective belief, it's not arrogance, but it's this belief that you have a purpose to do good things, hopefully great things, but you don't know. That if you are doing things that change structural inequalities, then you're always going to be in difficult terrain, and sometimes very difficult terrain. And spending 30 years with with Operation Black Vote, tackling systemic racism. By the way, we started Operation Black Vote in 1996. Maybe some of you here weren't even born. But we did so because black men and women were dying in police custody, and nobody was being held to account. And often we would take to our own streets and tear our own streets down because we wanted justice. And we said, look, we can't be tearing our streets down. We need to understand how to get systemic change. And I remember a good friend of mine, a great colleague of mine, Derek Hines, he said to me, Simon, we've got to use the ballot box, not the bullet, which is a Malcolm X refrain. And so that journey of challenging the police, challenging local democratic institutions, the judiciary, Westminster, I've spent most of my life people disagreeing with me. I've spent most of my life being gaslit that you don't have a problem. It's all about merit. Take the chip off your shoulder. Look at that ethnic group. If they can do it, why can't you? And so it's not new to me. Sometimes it's more disappointing. Often when you see a rabid racist, you know that you've got to put up your fists. But when you see someone with a smile and say, I'm on your side, and yet the outcome is not undissimilar, then you have to, one, you're disappointed, and two, you have to use another tactic.
And
I think,
tell me about the other tactic. I mean, I like the refrain you used from Malcolm X or Martin Luther King about the ballot or the bullets. I automatically think of Malcolm X standing by the curtains with his rifle, looking through the window and thinking more about the bullet than the ballot itself. In the circumstances in which you found yourself in, and obviously Operation Black Vote is one way to deal with the circumstances in which black people face. Have you come across situations where you thought it will perhaps take a little bit more than that, the Malcolm X approach, when you've been in the House of Lords, when you've been at a place like Cambridge or anywhere else for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I've had to point the finger and say, behave. Sometimes I've had to be in somebody's face. But I do remember in the House of Lords when there was a moment I was talking, there was a debate about racism and about stop and search. And I saw a member of the House of Lords laugh. And I said, you think it's funny? You should ask child Q if it's funny to be stopped, searched, and humiliated.
Tell us a bit about child Q.
She was stopped and searched whilst menstruating.
A child.
And I'd begun the debate because I feel that I have to speak truth to power and not be afraid of that. So I'm in this gilded chamber. The House of Lords is utterly gilded with gold. There's a throne where the king sits when he opens Parliament. And I feel that it's my duty. So we're in this debate, and it's my turn to speak. And I said, my lords and ladies, hands up if you've been stopped and searched. I look around, and there's muttering. Hands up if you've been stopped and stripped searched. And they're looking around, and I could hear one pair behind me saying, you can't say that. You can't do that. I just did it.
These are powerful questions.
I just did it. And so...
And I'll check how many hands did go up.
Oh, none, of course, no. But it's about saying, look, it's not about me, it's about my role in these places. But here's the other thing, I think this is really important. Sometimes you have to be strong, physically strong. But to get things done, ultimately, you've got to take people on a journey with you. And I was really wonderfully fortunate to be on Desert Island Disc just recently. And Lauren Laverne said in her introduction, she said, what characterizes your your journey and transformation to these institutions is that it seems to me that you've adopted conversation rather than confrontation.
Okay.
And I often tell black activists, other activists, I say to them that I want you to be brilliant. I want you to have all the tools in your armory, but above all, I want you to be smart. When I was much younger in the political space, I'd be too angry for my own good. Mm-hmm. I'd win the argument, but not taking anyone forward, because I felt that I had the moral authority, the righteousness to demand to be angry, but the shutters came down, and I thought, this is not working. Mm-hmm. I need to be able to almost hold your hand, even though you might be my enemy, even though you might be an enemy that smiles or not understanding, and together we go on a journey in which I say, if I win, doesn't mean you lose. Can I show you a pathway in which I win, you win, and we all win? And
tell me about the time when you realised that was the way forward. I mean, I do want to get to the question about how all of this impacts on your own mental health. But tell me about when this all started for you.
Hard lessons of just. I think, and it's right that you bring it back to mental health, because I'd come away from those angry conversations. I mean, I'd often ruin dinner parties. We're having nice food. Here's the other thing too about being nice, about being polite. I'd make people feel so relaxed that they'd forget I was black. I swear to you, I swear. So I'll give you an example. We're having nice, polite conversation. As black people, honestly, you lean into what that other person likes. You lean into making them feel comfortable. It's what we do. I call it a hidden superpower, because so often we don't even know we're doing it. You're making the other person feel relaxed. But you can make them feel so relaxed, then they can turn around to you out of the blue and say, what is it with these black kids? Why can't they study? To my face. Why can't they do well at school? And I'd say, funny enough, actually, people thought that about young women back in the day, that their place was best in the kitchen and they couldn't go on to education. And then you could see, oh, I'm sorry, and then maybe a few tears and or anger back at me. So it's a high wire act. It's a high wire act, and I don't always get it right. But I think, I'm 60, nearly 62 now. You should say I don't look it.
You don't. You're fantastic for your age. But what are the techniques then that you use to make non-white people happy or comfortable?
Yeah.
I mean, is it a case of walking down the street and crossing the road when you see somebody coming towards you who isn't the same colour, who isn't the same gender, or is there something else that you're doing?
I don't know. I mean, I think my mother, who brought me up as white, by the way, and she.
Wait a minute. What do you mean by that? Your mother brought you up as white?
No. I was fostered, then adopted.
By parents.
Yes.
Okay.
She showed me lots of love. Mm-hmm. She chose me, and so I think I hope.
I do just want to stop you there, because sorry for interrupting you before by saying that, but normally, in counselling and psychotherapy, if there's a Freudian slip of some sort, it normally comes from somewhere. And the fact that I thought I heard you say that your mother brought you up as white was saying something.
That might be what you wanted to hear.
Maybe. And it also was actually maybe coming from true. Where you.
I mean, I am on the couch, but.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt
I was given lots of love, and so it's easy. I hope it's easy for me to show love, and I think if you show love and you show decency, then people are more likely to warm to you. And if then you can have the difficult conversations, then it's a win-win. And, you know, I feel blessed in this job. I have the greatest job. Because, I mean, there's one thing to transform institutions. There's quite another to educate. And I feel that I'm not only, and I don't mean this in a big-headed way at all, but I often feel that I'm not only educating 1,400 students, but I'm on a journey of education for our institution, and more broadly Cambridge. And then when you think about Cambridge, one of the most elite institutions on the planet, if Cambridge can get it better, nearly right, then that's a beacon.
What I'd like you to think about also as well is in some ways, a juxtaposition of you here in Cambridge and you in your white family.
Right.
I mean, in some ways, it's very interesting that you've ended up here and are able to manage in the way that you have.
Right.
Because I think you're partly saying also as well that being adopted by a white family has in some ways prepared you for majority white situations. Are you saying that? Is there anything about that that rings a bell?
Yeah, I think a lot of kids in the 1970s, we went to all white schools, but you know, when in the 1970s at school, you were very quickly aware that you were black, and you were very quickly aware that you wanted to be black. I mean, not just because of Pele or Muhammad Ali, but you knew the system was against us. I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of us black kids in white schools wanted to be like the white kids, particularly the ones with blonde hair and blue eyes, because you know, they got all the girls, and as a kid, you want to belong. But it quickly dawned on us that we couldn't belong. So we had to be us. So we had to be the Pele. You had to be the Muhammad Ali, and own that, if you like, because that gave us status, it gave us pride. But we had to navigate through this white world. And yes, you're right, I've been doing that. And I've had to learn, and I know this, I'm on the couch, so I might as well say it, I've had to learn to own my blackness.
Tell me a bit more about that. What do you mean?
Well, I think because you want to belong, that you try and, particularly in the white spaces, fit in. You want to wear the clothes. I don't get me wrong, I never listened to rock music. But, trust me.
What music do you listen to?
Jazz, dance music, but you know, in saying that, I found reggae initially difficult because I wasn't in that black space. I wasn't in that Caribbean space that listened to Bob Marley. You know, I love Bob Marley, but I wasn't drenched. I wasn't drenched in that.
Now, this is interesting. And let me just tell you about my counter-transference reaction when I hear you say this, because in the first 10, 15 minutes, you come across as somebody who is very good at acclimatizing to the situation in which you find yourself in.
Right.
I mean, there's a brilliant example in your book where I think you were a mechanical engineer in a garage and there was lots of Asian guys as well as white guys, and you acclimatized yourself with the Asian members of the garage, and you became very close friends with them, and you fitted in. You managed to fit in.
Right.
You've managed to fit in many areas of your life with the majority around you.
Sure.
But yet, now we're going to be talking about a black majority situation, you know, people who listen to reggae or who listen to jazz. You said that you found that a bit more of a challenge. Did I hear you right?
No. Nice try. What I meant was that I wasn't in, it wasn't my daily life, and so when my other black friends at the time, if they lived in a black family, you went into the house and there was reggae music, lots of reggae music, and they had dreadlocks and I didn't, in saying I had to find my blackness is the truth. Because if you're in the White House, why would you know about the origins of the Caribbean? And so I had to learn it, I had to own it, and then I had to take it with me. Now, owning it and taking it with me, it's been my journey, but I also cannot dismantle, if you like, that those white spaces. And so, to your point, that may have given me some strings to my bow in which I've been able to navigate. As you said, when I was in Leicester, I had the choice when I was in Leicester as a car mechanic. I went into this garage as an apprenticeship, and on one side there were white mechanics, on the other side there were Asian. And where do I go? I actually went with the other white apprenticeships, and so I went with them, and got into trouble. Got into trouble very quickly. Is it gone again? Can you hear me? Yeah. I got into trouble. I crashed the car after my 6th week, and I didn't even have a license. And one of the Asian guys said to me, "You want to learn this? You want to learn this trade? You want to be a sensible young man? Bring your toolkit and come and join us." So I went to the other side and immersed myself in Indian culture, Indian food, and learned to be a good car mechanic.
Indeed, and as I say, I have to remind you, yes, you've been very good at acclimatizing to the situations in which you find yourself in. You also, as well, mentioned that you had to learn about blackness.
Yeah.
Tell me when and how that happened.
Well, I mean, you always know you're black because when we were, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10, the skinheads would say, "Send the WOGS to Vietnam." So you knew you were targeted. When we played football and we were fast, we were called Pele. But these were snippets of blackness. It wasn't until, actually, I'd go to the barbers, me and my brother. My white mother didn't know how to do our hair, but somebody said to her, "Go to Highfield, where the black area was, and they'll do your boy's hair." And me and my brother used to go to the barbers in Highfield, which is the black area, and we'd go to this person's flat, and we'd get there about 10 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning, and we wouldn't leave till 5. Because if you were a kid, you had to wait. You had to wait. All the adults would come in, and then they'd get their hair done, and you'd be like this, and you kept stum. But I learned black politics in that barbers. Okay. I heard them men cuss out black people, white people, and the fact that we had independence in the Caribbean but no power, and I just absorbed it. I didn't even know I was absorbing it. But I think, when I come to the making of Simon Woolley, being in that barber's flat for so many hours was instrumental.
What was it like for you then at 7, 8, 9 years old to realize that there was something more to you than the previous 7 years, 8 years?
Well, it made you angry. Made you angry. And me and my friends, very quickly, we all learned how to fight.
Okay.
We all went boxing, to a boxing club, because we knew, the older guys, they told you about injustice, and they said, you better look after yourself, you better look after yourself. So we all learned how to box. My friend Chris Pyatt went on to become a world champion. I saw him a couple of weeks ago. But we all went to the boxing ring and thought we were Muhammad Ali, just dancing around, and I was quick. I looked good until someone hit me. I said, "Bam, get me out of here." But I know how to fight. You know how to look after myself.
Yeah, several examples of that in your book as well. You did know how to look after yourself. Yeah. So you then learned or began to learn that you were black and that you were different,
right.
Even though you were living in a majority white household, a majority white city as it was at the time. Tell me about, if you remember then, what kind of impact that might have had on your well-being as well, and maybe your mental health. And what I'm interested in really is how you've managed to keep a straight face, keep good mental health, keep good well-being when you have continuous challenges related to your race.
You know what? Looking back now, I have no idea how we survived. I swear to you. We faced such atrocious racism from people who should have known better.
Who's we?
In schools.
Okay.
People in positions of power. When you're a young man going for a job, when you're going to the bank. I remember coming to London from Leicester. It must have been about 17, 18. And I remember I'd got a job and I said to the bank clerk or manager or whatever, could I have an overdraft for £100 because of the timing? And I remember looking me in the eyes and you know, when you're black, you know that look. You just do. You can't say it, but you know it. And they look at you in the eyes and say, no. And you want to scream, but no one's listening. You know if you lose it, you'll be behind bars. And I saw that happen too. There was me and Chris Pyatt, the boxer, his brother Raymond Pyatt, and 3 other white friends. We were all, you know, real mixed working class council estate group. And we're in town, and the white kid, Darren Darby, plays with an ATM. The ATMs had just come about. And he plays with an ATM. Before you know it, 3 police cars converge on us all. Raymond Pyatt's the tallest, represented England at high jump. The police officers jump out the car and jump on him first. And they're whacking him and they're whacking him. And he's fighting back. Proud man, Raymond Pyatt. He gets taken away. They charge him, listen to this, they charge him with assault. He did nothing. He tried to defend himself. And I saw that with my own eyes. In fact, in court, I was a witness, and I was still at school, and I'm in the dock, first time I've been in court, and I'm in the dock, and I see all these people, and the prosecutor said to me, so, Simon Woolley, you're a good friend of Raymond? Yes, I am. And you think he's a good young man? Yes, he is. And then he said to me, would you be surprised if Raymond Pyatt said to a police officer, copper, you stink? No, he said, would you say that Raymond would say that? And I said, no. And he did. He did, the prosecutor said, are you surprised? I said, yes, I'm surprised. And the court laughed, and I said, but I tell you this, I tell you one thing for sure, that I saw with my own eyes, that we were minding our own business. Police officers came and beat up my friend, beat him up. I was this little kid in the dock. He was found not guilty.
Yeah, not surprisingly. What sort of impact did that have on you to see that the police would be like this with you and your peers who happen to be the same colour?
Well, I mean, it's a cumulative. I mean, I had the same when I came out of my house. I came out of my house once with a bag of washing. My washing machine broke down. I come out of the house, I'm living in leafy South Woodford. I'm a young kid from Leicester, and I've got I wouldn't say a loud mouth, but I can talk, and I'm a good salesman. Anyway, so I bought my own flat 22 years of age. I come out the flat with a bag of washing, and I'm walking down the street in South Woodford, and a police car comes by, screeches to a halt, reverses up, and the police officers jump out. What are you doing? I said, I'm going to the laundrette. They said, there's been a spate of burglaries around here. I said, I'd be some burglary, wouldn't I? Stealing dirty washing. They said to me, have you got any ID? I said, I don't need ID to go to the laundrette. I said, look, I will show you ID. This is my car, this is my house. I went to go into the house. I'm opening the door and I'm going up the stairs. And then the police officer was behind me. And I turned around to him. I'm 22 years of age. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm coming with you. I said, no, you're not. You're not invited. You wait here. And as I went to go up the stairs, he ran up the stairs and dragged me down the stairs and arrested me. He chained me to the gate of my house, outside the house, and said, wait here, we'll see if you live here. And he knocked on my neighbour's house. And the neighbour came out and said, do you know this person? I said, yeah, that's Simon. But now they're enjoying their power.
Yeah.
So they knock on somebody else's house too.
They do, and I do want to put the same question to you again, Simon.
I don't know.
With just 5 minutes left to go. Only because I've had young men sit in a seat where you're sat with exactly the same circumstances, going to the laundrette, back in the day, teenagers, being stopped by police, bundled into the back of a van, and the impact on them is that they end up with agoraphobia and not leaving the house for many years because they're frightened they're going to get accosted again.
Right.
That's the impact it's had on their mental health. I want to ask you again about the continuous growing number of incidences that you may have witnessed or at least been a victim of.
Sure.
How has that impacted upon you?
The truth is, until these conversations, and I have to hold the emotion back because I relive it, that the humiliation. I would argue most black people get a box, put it in the box, put a lock on it, keep it closed. Keep it closed. And I tell you how I know that. Because the Simon...
That's something that you do?
It is. The Simon Woolley today, if I'd have been arrested, I'd be suing their behinds. The reason why I put it in the box, why do you think?
Tell me.
I need to get on with life. And I cannot carry that burden of pain. I cannot, will not put it in the box. You know what I say to myself? Don't get mad, get successful. Don't get mad, get in a position of power where you can make a difference. I mean, I'm sure I'm not saying that at the time, but maybe my mother who's passed now, maybe she's saying to me, you have a bigger calling. But to your point, black men need space to have these conversations where they can share the lived experience and not let it internalize, where it can become something quite poisonous, if you like.
A space also as well, maybe to open the box.
Correct.
Just a little.
Correct.
Is there a fear or a worry also as well for black men, or
It's
rather
traumatic.
for you about?
It's traumatic. It's traumatic to open the box. I'm opening it now, and I'm on camera. I can't cry. I can't. But it's reliving some of that.
Okay.
I just wrote an article last week. It's published today about the Black Atlantic. The Black Atlantic, and I think with the enslavement of Africans, for many black people I know, we know about it. We know how it's changed the world. We know how we have a global inequity, but we often choose to keep it in the box. But I chose to open that box and go to this exhibition. And go to this exhibition, and you know, I implore all of you, if you have that strength for that moment to go, it's traumatic.
How do you manage that trauma?
I was angry. You know, is this global museum in which tens of thousands of people go to, predicated on the enslavement of Africans. That's a tough call. I think they are addressing that. But to see it, and there's a wonderful gut-wrenching piece in which Aliado Equiano comes alive in an actor who's reading his reflections on the passage from the old world, the African world, to the new world. And so almost from the grave, somebody's telling you what happened. Wow. Wow.
I'm afraid we're fast running out of time. We're just about to say goodbye, and there's so much we could talk about. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with before you finish?
You know,
What's this
Cambridge University is a great institution, and for me, that it is going on an extraordinary journey. That it's opened that box in terms of, I would argue, some of the biggest questions it's ever had. And it's traumatic for them, it's traumatic for us. About who we are, who gets heard, who gets elevated. I hope these conversations give the black students, past, present, and future, a sense of belonging. Not just a place in which, as some might say, they survived, but they thrived. They thrived. And their thriving benefits the whole world.
Absolutely, it does. Hopefully there'll be an opportunity to maybe raise a little bit more of this during the question and answer session. But for now, thank you so much, Lord Wooley, for your few moments. Thank you. Could you take a seat? Okay, our second guest, and before the break, is George the poet. So if I can please invite George up on stage. What I've seen them do in some talk shows is they have a bit of music in the background. And normally the guest comes on dancing as well, but we're not going to do that. How you doing, man? Let's see you. Please take a seat. Okay. As people have already witnessed, and as you know yourself for sure, this isn't even as long as a therapeutic hour, which normally takes 50 minutes or so. But I suppose the thing is, with me and you, this is not the first time we're meeting, thankfully. Right. Just last week, we met at the University of London at the Black Men on the Couch event there, and spent half an hour, well, basically having a discussion about you and your life. So in a way, this is perhaps the first time in the whole of the series. Well, it did happen once before with Paul Cannonville, the first black player for Chelsea. But the first time for a while that I've had someone who's come back for a follow-up session. So thank you very much for doing that, George. This is
it's
great.
It's a privilege.
Good to see you again, man. What I tend to do when I meet a client for the second time is ask them about their experience, what they thought of the first session, and what's been going on for them in the 7 days since. So what did you think of the first time we met?
So in the first session, we had we had a conversation similar to the one you and Simon just had, where I talk a little bit about my personal experience, but it quickly slips into the international context, into the historical context. And you know what? I actually felt a little bit bad. Thank you. I felt bad, not bad, but self-aware in doing that, because I tend to be someone who's immersed in the thought, you know, in reflections on history and the global context. And again, to Simon's point about being at polite, you know, dinner, dinner settings and being the one to take the conversation in a certain direction, especially being a husband now for 2 years, learning about when and, time and a place for different kind of conversations. I just feel like I don't enjoy that seems to be my default, talking about my life in the context of the historical black struggle. But I can't help it, and I don't know that I'm doing it certain times. I'm just talking about my relationship with blackness, my relationship with education, Africa, the Black Britain itself. And yeah, in doing that, it slides that way. So sometimes I reflect on our conversation and I think, what would it have taken for me to not, end up talking about that? But I don't know. It just is what it is.
Counselling and psychotherapy is about, or I suppose more than anything else, self-awareness and finding out a bit more about who we are, where we come from, why we do the things we do. And I think I might have explained to you in the first session that the way I tend to work is to give some focus and attention to relationships with significant others, parents and other loved ones, and how you might replicate or repeat those patterns of behaviour in the here and now. And I wouldn't mind maybe spending a few moments thinking a little about your early life, and how that was, and how maybe you might repeat the patterns of that. We do know that you were a student of the University of Cambridge, and I would very much like to find out how you negotiated your way through an elite institution like this. I know you were also as well in a private school, but first things first, tell me a little bit about your upbringing.
I grew up in northwest London. My mum, my dad, and my big brother. Before long, four more little siblings came along. We had a lot of, as me and my brother, as the oldest, had a lot of responsibility over our siblings. But we had a good time. There was a lot of music in my house.
What sort of music?
A lot of music from the Earth, Winds and Fires to the Bob Marleys. A lot of Michael Jackson. My brother and I were obsessed with Michael Jackson. Okay. But so were my parents, in our defense. And my older brother quickly got into rap, which, did I take to rap straight away? Yeah, I think I did. Him more so though, and rap became a main character in our lives and in our community. Led to me becoming a rapper, which led to me becoming a poet. Because I was in Cambridge, the context didn't feel appropriate to rap, but I switched my style. It was the same lyrics, but different delivery. Yeah, I don't know, what do you want to know?
Well, let's stay with the familial situation for a little bit. 1 of 6 children, right?
6 children, yeah.
How did you negotiate your way through that? Competing maybe for the love and attention of your parents, maybe?
Nah, like I said, because we were given a lot of responsibility, I felt like a co-parent early. Also, because fortunately, I got the gratification of being recognized as a good reader and then a good student early on. I felt like I like the respect. I like the respect that comes with positions of responsibility and being known as someone who can use their head. Even in my estate, I grew up in a council estate. In our neighborhood, I was kind of known to be a thinker, someone who liked to, I would say an intellectual, I guess. Intellectual's the wrong word, but for example, when I was younger, there was a wave of reversion, they would say, to Islam among our demographic. The guys a little older than us.
Okay.
A lot of them found Islam in prison, to be honest, and they came back to the community and wanted to really share what they'd learned and were sincere about the power of Islam to improve your life. But I was really into the church. So as a 13-year-old, I used to debate these guys who were 19, 20, whatever. we used to debate education. We used to debate about spirituality all day, and they gave me respect because of that. They liked that about me, and the kids my age knew that my frequency I tended towards deep conversation. I don't know if that's how they remember me, but I remember people recognizing, like, for example, when I got into Cambridge, no one was surprised in my neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah, but again, these are things that I liked because partly because as one of the oldest kids, I didn't want to ask anything of my little siblings that I wasn't demonstrating myself. And I wanted them to be serious about their education. I felt like our education is very important. We weren't born into money. And our parents made it very clear that, you know, this is it. Like, this is how you strategize and live your life on your own terms. You have to engage. My mom always used to say, no one can take your education away from you, no matter what happens. And I believe that. I did believe that. And again, the gratification of people recognizing my intellectual ability young became something that it was easier for me to just lean into that and keep developing that than to downplay myself or pretend that this isn't what I want.
It's an extraordinary story because, well, you hear a lot of the time that young black men are either objectified sexually or seen as violent or seen as, you know, a number of negative things, not necessarily as an intellectual who's on his way to Cambridge, and when he gets there, it's not a surprise. So that's extraordinary. I do want to touch on a little bit about...
I was surprised, they weren't.
You were?
Yeah.
Tell me why you were surprised.
All right, so I went to a grammar school which was removed from my community, like an hour and a half away.
Right.
12, 13 miles away. And the caliber of education was very high. I was one of only 9 black kids out of 180 in our academic year. So it was predominantly Asian. And yeah, like I said, very competitive. So there were people who had consistently performed better than me throughout our school lives that didn't make it into Cambridge. And when I applied...
Black people, you say? Or
not
white
even,
people?
no, not even black people. The one black kid that I knew who also applied got in, but he was one of the greatest students I've ever seen in my life.
Okay.
Yeah, that guy was different.
Okay. As you are,
I wasn't.
actually. No, you see you as different, bro.
I feel like I've worked through a lot of this imposter syndrome now, but back then I knew myself. I didn't love the academic method, not the method, the environment, the culture of school, the kind of school I went to, conservative grammar school. I feel like it was, the cultural dissonance was a big drain on my education life and my school life. Just not feeling the way, you know, the energy of the institution. It's just like, I love to learn. We can talk about this all day, but if I have to dress a certain way and move a certain way and talk at a certain time and not talk like this, now you're getting in the way of me wanting to learn. Now I don't want to be here.
I kind of hear you what you're saying about the cultural dissonance, and there's also as well the cognitive dissonance, the impact it has on your mind, the imposter syndrome that you were having to negotiate and deal with, as you say. Tell us a bit more about that, because you get black students at Cambridge, at Oxford, at university who say that they get there and they feel like they don't belong, and it takes something from them to be able to get past the first year, get past the final year, get the graduate jobs, you know, and all of that they have to contend with. Tell me how you manage the imposter syndrome, as you put it.
So when I got here, I became a recluse.
Okay.
For the first time in my life, really. I wanted to be away from people more than I wanted to be among people for the first time in my life. And part of that was to do with not feeling like I had the social circle that I was used to. I didn't feel that anyone was mean to me. I didn't feel like it was an unpleasant experience. I just ended up becoming someone who was fully immersed in study, and as a result needed a creative expression out of it, which is how the poetry was born.
Right, okay.
I became a poet here.
Is that something you would advocate to black students entering higher education and particularly elite institutions? Firstly, to become a recluse? Or would you be advocating something else?
I don't recommend it. Like, it didn't happen on purpose. And I tried.
Because that must be challenging, yeah.
I threw myself into the social scene here at first, but I don't feel like I was getting as much out as I was putting in. I would say, yeah, from a cultural perspective, I was happy to go to like the formals, these parties that they have within, or dinners, I should say, that they have within colleges, and you know, we drink wine or whatever, and I'm meeting people, and I'm very, very interested in everyone I am, but there's just such a gap between what I'm into and what most people are into. You know, no one knows any of the music, and music was a big thing in our lives. Like I said, rap became a main character. No one knows any of the music that I'm into. No one really knows the references that I grew up on, and you know, like, I have been in the black community, or I grew up in the black community, you know, from birth. And I was aware that there were different communities because I spent 7 years in a school, which was very diverse. But I guess in school, I still had the option of going home at the end of the day. And it was, yeah, there were enough people around me in school who understood my cultural context. And here I was starved of that for a while. I feel like I can't speak on behalf of students that are here now, but when I meet students here now, I just think, I just met a couple earlier today, man, the leaders of the ACS. I think, what? Just from the little interaction, I wish we were here at the same time. Right. I can tell, like, we would have had the kind of connection that I needed when I was here.
Well, like Simon has said, things have changed, certainly since the 10 years that you were here. What I'm hearing you say, though, a little bit like Simon also as well, is that you've learned to negotiate your way through situations in which you aren't normally used to acclimatize, because, you know, you're in to some extent, a foreign situation when you're here, when you're in private school that you're in. Was there some of that for you, having to learn how to acclimatize, become part of the system, so to speak, and learn that? I mean, you know, and in your own upbringing, you're not going to formal dinners and drinking wine, as you say, on a regular basis. I mean, you know,
yeah, there was a lot of acclimatization. When I got here, I quickly realized I was the only black man in my year in my college, and I couldn't really see another black man in any of my lectures, so maybe the only one in my faculty in that year again. And that didn't intimidate me, that didn't put me off. I was like, all right, cool, let's you know, so what? That's okay, like, let's learn, let's have fun. And part of that was me performing at a talent show. The month that I got here, my friend was the head of the ACS at the time, the one that I said was the best student ever. That guy, he got here the year before me. He was ACS president. He was putting on a show called Culture Fest 2010. And he knew me as a rapper, so he wanted me to perform. Right. But again, I've already read the room, I've done my scan, and I'm like, I'm the only black man on campus, I'm the only black man in my lectures. I'm not gonna be known as a rapper as well. That doesn't feel right. Especially the kind of rap that I come from, it was grime, it was the first wave of grime. Okay. It's a very much urban, and I mean urban in a geographic sense, urban phenomenon among our demographic. And if you weren't there, I don't want to be the first one to try and explain it to you. So reflecting now, I find that interesting. You know, I listen to it, I think about that in the way that you might observe it as, what would you call yourself, a therapist or a...
Yeah, therapist is good, like a therapist,
right.
counsellor.
So I put myself on the couch. I'm like, what would have been so bad about being the representative of your local culture in this environment?
That's a very good question.
Right, and I don't know. It just the thought of it made me uncomfortable. I couldn't guarantee that the respect was there. I couldn't guarantee that this new audience wouldn't be looking at me with a bit of a sneer, like look what the black guy's doing.
How did it go? And by the way, what name did you use then? Did you have a name for
I think
yourself?
at that point, I just called myself. No, George the Poet came like maybe 6 months or so into that journey. But at the time, like Shaolin monks. Like, I was very much into the rap group Wu-Tang, and they were all into Shaolin stuff. So my name was an adaptation of the word Shaolin, but it's Shaolin, which is just a play on some slang that we had at the time. At the time, shower was related to sister nose over there, related to some street stuff, basically. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that go anyway in the end, that event?
Yeah, so I said to my friend, I'll perform, but I'll try it differently. I'll make it a bit more acoustic, a bit more stripped back, because the way that we rapped was very percussive. There was a lot of drums, there was a lot of noise. And I thought that might be an alienating factor to an audience who would otherwise be open-minded. If I could present myself as more of a communicator than an entertainer from a different world or something exotic. No, I'm just a guy talking, so it might rhyme, it might, flow. If it does, then all good. That was my new conception of how I'm going to present myself. And that literally became the foundation of everything I've done since.
Indeed it has. Indeed it has. I'm very interested in the possibility of you reciting some of that now, if you're able to.
Yeah, sure. This is a poem called Mixed Messages, which is also inspired by reflections on race. I'm the living future of my ancestors. I'm the last chapter of the story that they wrote. I wish I could hear that story from their perspective. Just curious, I'm conflicted because things have changed in ways no one predicted. I want my message to be unrestricted, but I feel like it's becoming scripted. We want to pay homage. We want to give credit, but that's symbolic. We need systemic. It's a mixed message. Is it us that's bugging? How can Black lives matter if justice doesn't? Now our economics and our politics are tied up in the West's controlling hand. And we ask ourselves how we got in this position, but the answer is simple. The road was planned. We discuss the, great Black Britons, but not the colonized and enslaved Africans whose blood, sweat, and tears helped to turn Great Britain into a global brand. So how do we discuss this with our young people if it makes the country feel uncomfortable? Mixed messages. Thank you.
I love that, I have to say. If it makes the country feel uncomfortable, have you found that that's what you've had to do to, well, one, get along and survive, but also as well to be that educator, that communicator?
Yeah, I think my life has just happened to fall on the fault lines between communities a lot of the time because of where I went to school, studying over here. So when I listened to your conversation with Simon, it is, Simon's such an accomplished individual, number one, and then someone who is so, genuinely rooted in the word that you use, activism, from such a substantial vantage point. What you've chosen to do with your life is deeply meaningful. And even you have that reflex of situating your personal experience within the global and historical context. I appreciated what you said about soaking up political consciousness from the barbershop. I also spent many years in the barbershop I was an assistant, or like I made myself an assistant. I used to hang out there and get tips for doing whatever people wanted, picking up food orders, sweeping up the floor, whatever. And I referenced in my work quite a bit how Rasta consciousness was a big part of me conceptualizing blackness and deciding where I fit. Malcolm X being also a hero, and me just being drawn to strong, uncompromising political analyses of the black condition, and men, you know, going back to my role as the second child, or the, you know, second of six, leading, men who don't shirk leadership or feel that, you know, society's putting too much pressure on them by expecting them to answer for their community or represent. I liked people that didn't shirk that responsibility, that didn't feel like it was improper.
How do you handle that pressure? Because it is a pressure.
So I grew up yearning for people that didn't run away from it. Now I feel like I said, I don't want to ask anything of my younger siblings that I'm not ready to demonstrate, to impute, to embody. So even though I believe that there won't be an individual who improves anything. You know, there will be waves of consciousness across generations that shift society, that change, that rectify injustice. Waves of consciousness. So that means that there needs to be group reflection. There needs to be group transformation. And in advocating for that, I have to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So it doesn't feel like an extra piece of work to think about my responsibility to my community, to constantly demonstrate things for a younger audience that allow them to navigate some of the minefields, the cultural minefields, the intellectual minefields that I felt that I had to navigate to get here, and then I had to navigate while I was here in Cambridge.
Wow. Now that's a lot. I mean, I don't know where I read it, but it's like, you know, if a black man wants to become a leader or an intellectual or someone that helps the rest of the population, the black population, to make something of themselves, they have to be prepared to put themselves through the sorts of pressures that you're talking about. And also as well risk being scared off, killed off, bought off, something happening to them. How do you manage, I'm asking you again, that pressure, that risk, or is it something you just don't think about?
I think you just have to love it.
Love it?
I love it. I'm dead serious. I love it. Comedian Cat Williams once was telling a joke about a guy who got mauled by a tiger in a zoo. In a zoo, okay? That's the funny part that he makes fun of. And he talks about how everyone went on TV and, in his words, snitched on the tiger. They said, this is uncharacteristic. I can't believe the tiger did this. Oh, we're going to discipline this tiger. We're going to put this tiger down. And he landed the joke on the point that the one thing, someone who means it, you know, the tiger in this sense, the tiger is really a tiger. And you've got them in this playground. And the one thing that tiger wants is for anyone, anyone, to come in this pit and see if they're really a tiger. And he said, if you can't understand how a tiger feels in the zoo, you'll never understand how a black man feels in America. Again, I watched that when I was young, but I remember feeling like that's a very interesting analogy. And the older I get, the more I'm like, I have to constantly challenge myself and challenge the people around me to remember what the point is in me being George the Poet. Some people get used to the easy parts of it. Oh, people, like your work. Oh, someone at my workplace wants to take a selfie with you, the celebrity of it, people get enamored with. But what led me to wanting to be someone who speaks about the black condition is struggle, pain, injustice, things that never should have happened. There shouldn't exist a museum about the enslavement of Africans, but here we are. Now, we don't have the space to deal with that. So when someone is in the public space with the opportunity to speak to the consequences of everything that's happened, that person cannot now get distracted with celebrity or get distracted with riches and fine accolades. You have to remember that you are dealing with a disgustingly unfair situation. You know, most of us black people in this room have ancestors whose labor was wiped off the books. You know, we're working for something for a long time without the accumulation of wealth, without the recognition within our economic system of what they contributed. So, after a while, it feels like generation after generation, we're starting from scratch, economically, culturally, intellectually. Again, the intellectual deficit that is manufactured, that's imposed on us. We come from cultures with rich histories. My wife always tells the story, we're both from Uganda. When she was a kid in Uganda once, she got a rash. Her grandma went out into the garden, ground up some leaves, made a paste out of it, put it on her rash. It seared off the rash, and her skin went dark, but ever since that day, she's like never had a rash again. Grandma's no longer here, but she can't even, no one even knows the leaves that she ground up and where she got that information from, So there's all sorts of deficit across black life, spiritual deficit. When the missionaries came to Uganda, they built churches on top of our spiritual sites, you know, as part of the whole psyop, you know, like changing us. So there's a lot that I feel the responsibility to represent, and yeah, that's very important.
Very interesting. We've literally got just a little over 5 minutes left, but I do want to put this to you. As again, I said when you sat in the chair, that sometimes what we do with counselling and psychotherapy is we try and think about, discuss, reflect upon the relationship with the significant others, particularly the parents. What you're saying to me now also as well, in a way, I think, is that to you or to black people in the diaspora and in Africa, is that Africa is also as well the parent. And there is the relationship with the parent that has either been interrupted, arrested, that may have made things be the way that they are now, but there is something about the reconnection, using the example you just gave of your wife, that might help to make things different. Am I hearing this from you? I mean, I know that there is a lot of work recently that you've been focusing on looking at in relation to the Congo, say, and Patrice Lumumba, which has been fascinating to read, actually. Is there that connection for you? Is there something about the emancipation of black people across the world that is connected?
That's a very good read. What your read of my thoughts is on point. I do believe that there is a reconnection that we need to be intentional about as black people. I worry about the ease, like we are in many ways bribed into being quiet and just going along with whatever personal benefits we can secure for ourselves, due to, especially in the diaspora, due to our proximity to whiteness and to white wealth, white capital, the opportunity to get involved in Western economies. That keeps us rooted over here. It's not most people's, I don't think it's most black people's intention to leave this country, in this country, you know. I think the harsher things get, the more people are considering it and seeing the benefits of re-identifying with the mother countries, the motherland. Yeah, so much of our lives would just be more convenient if we just go along with the flow, and we've got to be mindful of that.
Yeah. I'm afraid we've fast run out of time, but I would hope, most certainly, they'd be able to express a little bit more of this in the question and answer session. But for now, George the Poet, thank you very much for spending some time with me. Thanks, bro. Yeah, I'll call you back up in a few minutes, yeah? Okay, it's time for a break. So we've got about 20 minutes. For those of you that are online, please don't disappear. When we come back, we have our final very special guest, Jason Arday, the youngest black male professor in the country, I think is the title that's been given to you. So looking forward very much to talking to you afterwards. So a break now for around 20 minutes, and we'll be back with you then. Thank you very much, everyone. And that is normally the most interesting part of the... Joined us online. If you can send your questions in via Slido, please. If you can put your name next to your question, and then we'll try our level best to answer as many of those as possible. So I'll be inviting our guests back on. But before we do that, let's have a chat with our final guests. So I'd like to please invite Jason Arday onto the stage. Welcome. Please take a seat, Jason. And somebody corrected me, actually, when I was in the break. The Cambridge's youngest black professor or Cambridge's youngest professor?
I think probably Cambridge's youngest professor.
Wow, okay. Yeah, that's really saying something. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate that you've agreed to be one of my guests tonight. Sometimes when I start with brand new clients, I ask them to free associate. So just say the first thing that comes to mind. There's a game sometimes I play with them as well. I've got these cards here, which belong to my daughter who's in the audience, and they're cards with pictures on and a single word. I shuffle them and I ask the client to take one and then just to say something about that, and then we just continue the conversation from there. So I'm going to do that with you. I hope that's okay.
That's brilliant.
Okay, let's take one of those.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. You all well? Good. It's really good to see everyone.
So what you got?
We have nature.
Nature. Okay. What comes up for you when you see that?
What comes up? Nature. Greenery, people. How wonderful and beautiful this world actually is when you're in the stillness of silence. The world at night. I love nighttime and how still everything is, and then the kind of chaotic nature of what happens in the day is so different at night. There's a stillness in night that I've always loved, and that's probably because I've spent most of my adult life as an insomniac, so I'm always awake at night. So when I think of nature, I very much think of it in the night sense, and just how beautiful and melodic the night sky is.
Indeed, indeed. What can you tell us about insomnia and how that's affected you?
I mean, part of it is you just spend a lot of time thinking. You think, and I never had a vehicle to channel that energy into anything useful. So I would either go running or I would teach myself sociology and study as much as I could. So I always found an effective way to use that time, and also in more difficult times, I had a job, not that long ago, really, nearly 8 years ago, stacking shelves at Sainsbury's, and I had a cleaning job in the day, and I would lecture. A cleaning job in the morning, then I'd lecture in the day. So those were more difficult times because you're trying to do the best you can to support, friends, family, and it was a privilege doing all of those things. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about myself, and I was always able, at least from 21 years upwards, to put the night to good use, and tonight finds me here.
Indeed, thank you very much again for being here. And good to hear also as well that you're able to think about doing something creative with the time at night that you're not able to sleep because lots of people would just be there ruminating and worrying and causing themselves problems. But you were able to think and do differently in that respect.
Yeah, no, I mean, part of it as well was that, if I'm being honest, I always had this idea that I have very limited ability and very limited capabilities, and while I didn't have the skill, I had the will, and I needed to utilise every second and extract every sinew in my fibre to make the best of the situation. And I felt that I needed to. Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday talks about life being this game of inches.
Game of
inches.
right.
And for me, it was about taking all of those inches, all of those centimetres, all those millimetres, every single thing I could take to try and maximise it and maximise the best of what was a pretty modest vessel. So that was really part of what I tried to do. And yeah, I guess in some respects, it's led me to being able to share an evening with these wonderful people, and obviously Simon and George and your good self. So.
Well, and it's brought you here, but it's extraordinary because to me it sounds like hard work.
No, it was really hard. I mean, it sounds like an obvious thing to say, but it was really hard. And I think that maybe my age doesn't always betray that, but it was really hard. And, you know, I guess people identify with a couple of key ages. So, you know, 3, 11, 18 and 37, but there's a lot of things that happened in between, which is for another time. And it was hard. It was really hard. But as my mum always said, never pray for an easy life. And it's been a blessing having those lessons and those experiences. And, you know, there's a perverse love of it, because you learn so much being in that state of difficulty, in that state of flux. You find almost this kind of rhythm, not a circadian one, I was able to be able to sleep, but you find a rhythm of some sort, and you're able to kind of find your way into the light, and that becomes really important.
So it does. So you gave us, well, those ages. Can you remember all the way back to 3, what was going on for you then and what was so significant about that age?
No, I have no idea what was going on at 3. It's just that I was diagnosed with global development delay and autism when I was 3. So that's why that becomes a key age. And then obviously as you traverse kind of childhood, you know, for me, I didn't speak until I was 11. So there's a paralysis of speech in that sense, but there was an absolute beauty about observing human beings and observing the world around you. And so when you kind of draw a card like nature, that's part of it. You're observing human interaction and how, you know, something as simple as touch, you know, and the impact that can have on someone, and how people engage, or how a look can kind of reduce someone to tears, or how it can provide this sense of euphoria. And for me, it was all melancholic. There was a melody to it which always chimed with me, and there was a chorus that was reverberating, you know, as a child. And if anything, it came to an abrupt halt, to be honest with you, when I learned how to speak.
Right. You're right to talk a little bit more about before the age of 11, when you weren't speaking out to the world. I'd like to know about internal conversations then. What were they like, or was there an internal conversation?
It wasn't really an internal dialogue. It was more an observation of what's going on around you, and you know, a huge part of that observation is just my belief that human beings are great and wonderful people and capable of great and wonderful things, and that was an inherent belief instilled in me at a young age. And I guess seldom do people get to observe the world in situ without the absence of speech.
Yeah.
Very few people get to do that, apart from when you're a baby. And even then, there's a dialogue. There's some sort of connective dialogue. But for me, I got to observe the world, and you develop these unique perspectives on people, and you're able to read people, and probably more importantly, because the only thing you can trust is that you trust your judgment in people. And my judgment always is that everybody has the capacity to be good. And some people embody that and interweave that in every single thing they do. a lot of people have the potential to do it and don't do it, but fundamentally all of those things I experienced as a child taught me that nobody is born inherently bad, and there are circumstances that may make people good and there are circumstances that make people bad, but no one's born bad. So everyone has that gene in them to really tap into engaging with that capacity to be great, to love, to show compassion, to show empathy, to embrace someone and make someone feel. You know, I think the absence of feeling pretty much surmounts to being dead, right? And I mean that metaphorically. Mm-hmm. So it's this idea of feeling and what that embodies and how people feel it, you know, in here. And there's a reason why when people talk, you're moved. You know, George, you know, is an amazing orator, as is Simon. And there's a reason why when they speak, you know, they stir something in people. You know, I've been fortunate to know Simon for a very long time. You know, George, it's a really surreal thing. You know, you listen to someone, you know, thousands of times, and then here you are sat on a stage, you know, potentially breaking bread with these people that you very much look up to. And I guess part of that as well is that I had the privilege. I have a wonderful mother. So I don't call my mum, my name's Gifty, and I call her Gif. And every Ghanaian woman's called Gifty. So like, so my mum's no different. And you know, there's a funny story here, and I'll just keep it brief. My mum, you know, she always used to say, you know, God, like, I can't stand men. Like, please, if you bless me with children, don't bless me with any boys. Don't give me any boys. And she ended up with 4 boys. And she always said, you know what, like, I may have had 4 boys, but I'm going to bring you up like black women. And part of that is quite powerful, because really when you're brought up by a black feminist, it's no, I don't think it's a coincidence I ended up doing what I did for a living, even though I had no idea what I was going to do as a child. So those things become really powerful. And if anything, what my mum was an ode to was a tradition of black women who had uplifted and made space for black men to thrive. And I guess what's really interesting with that as a dialogue is that seldom do black men acknowledge that. And I think that's it's an important thing for me, because all of my praxis and the way I think about the world has very much been steered by a black feminist way of thinking, which has been integral to not only the research I do and the things that I've done, but my way of understanding and my way of being.
It's very, very interesting now that the first card you pick out is nature, but then there's a nature-nurture debate on how much you'd be socialised into a particular position. Now you're saying that no one is born bad, but you were socialised into that way of being. Now a social scientist would say that, obviously they would, but I guess what I'm interested in is a little bit more information about your socialisation. Up until the time that you were able to speak, to communicate with others, you were having some kind of an internal dialogue. Tell me about the age of 11 when you were able to then start communicating with others. What was that like for you? I mean,
yeah, so it was a really interesting experience. So I was born deaf in one ear. So because I think I'm too cool for school and I'm not, I actually have a hearing aid that I'm supposed to use, which I never use apart from when I'm lecturing. Oh. So very often, so as a child, I was signed to a lot. So I learned sign language, or I was taught sign language as a child. And to just kind of give you a brief scope, I spent what I would amount to about thousands of hours in speech therapy. So from the age of 2 to 11, I spent probably 10 hours a day in speech therapy. So it was a long time from 2 to 11. And actually the total amount of time was from 2 to 15. And so you go to these kind of sessions, you do phonic exercises, you kind of go through this algorithm of ways to speak and ways to engage. And one particular day, I had this cumbersome kind of hearing aid in my ear, and we go through the phonic exercises, and I take my hearing aid out, and I say to the speech therapist, who is a woman called Olwen Donnelly. Never forgot that name because it's the only Olwen I ever knew. And she says, "Jason, how are you today?" and I take my hearing aid out and I say hello. Now, it's quite a surreal thing when you're 11 years of age, but that's the first time. I didn't even know what my voice sounded like. So this is what comes out, and it's quite funny because I got 3 brothers who don't sound anything like me. So, and my mum's like, what did you say? Like, GIF, what GIF? GIF, so what did you say? And so I was like, hello. She was like shaking little Jason. She's like, oh my God, he's saying. She's like, God, oh my God. Oh my God. She was like, he heard my prayer, he heard my prayer, he heard my prayer. Say something else. Hello. She was like, what do you want for dinner? Hello. Like, Jason, are you feeling good? Hello. So obviously at that point, we're cooking with gas, and something is happening, and then subsequently, you begin to find a voice. But I guess what emerges when you come out of that kind of embryonic, melancholic bubble is you begin to understand what people are saying. And there becomes a lexicon for understanding what good means and what bad means. And that's where you almost lose this virginity, this innocence in some respects, in terms of, you do then realise human beings can be quite wicked and human beings can mock what they don't understand. But what is interesting is that what my mum, what GIF was able to do, and my dad, but particularly GIF, was to incarnate a really strong sense of identity. So I know Simon doesn't like rock music, but I love rock music. and it's my favourite genre of music. And for me, one of the things that was really powerful is that I always had a strong sense of who I was. So I was a black kid. I grew up on a council estate from South London. I was obsessed with rock music, and I was obsessed with tailoring. Those are the only 2 things that mattered to me. And I remember my dad went to this car boot sale, and he had these 2 massive pictures, and he just used to buy lots of random things and just stick them up in the house. And he said, it makes us look like we're cultured. And so I said to him, who are these 2 people? And he said, I said to him, I'm going to dress like that when I'm older. And he said, well, this person, they call him the Mod Father. This person's a guy called Paul Weller. And this person is a fellow Ghanaian. This is Oswald Boateng. And I said to him, like, wow, these 2 look incredible. He said, well, if you want to dress like that, you're gonna need to get a job that gives you a lot of money, Jason, because it costs a lot to look like that. Yeah. And lots of people have lots of different dreams about the things they want to do. Genuinely, besides looking after my family and friends, my only dream was I wanted to have a shirt made on Savile Row from the age of 14, and that was the only thing I wanted to do in life. And it was from a particular shop, Huntsman. So the 2 oldest shops on Savile Row are Henry Paul and Huntsman, both of which have been there for over a century. And the only thing I ever wanted to do was have a tailored shirt made at Huntsman. And by the grace of God, that happened a few years ago. So that was the only thing I ever wanted. And so it's amazing, kind of, some people want to be rich, some people want to have a big house. I just wanted to tailor. That was my thing. And I was like, I'm not going to be good at anything else, but I'm going to dress the best. I mean, I look like a hot mess today, but that was my thing. And that sense of identity was really wielded in this idea that I know who I am, and to be honest with you, my mum fostered this idea of make sure you like what you see, because you're going to be in states of turbulence, and the one thing you want to always be able to come back to is this idea, this strength of identity. So that was the thing that I always came back to, and I always, it was mapped against this strong sense of black identity. And it was more importantly mapped against this sense of, I know who I am.
I'm very interested in this way that you've developed yourself or nurtured yourself as opposed to nature, based on what it is that you've seen. Now, you've seen these 2 men, Boateng and Paul Weller, who have influenced your love for music or rock, but also as well dress as well. And these are 2 men who are certainly of the zeitgeist of the time and still have an influence today and make you who you are today. Tell me about other men in your life that may well have had such an influence.
Yeah, so I mean, there's probably an obvious person that it's not omitted from this, but Nelson Mandela, had a huge impact on my way of thinking. And it wasn't there's a really important thing about Nelson Mandela. There's a romanticisation of Mandela,
Yes, there is.
Madiba. And this is a funny story, but it's a true story, right? So me and my brothers are all waxing lyrical, and we're like, Madiba, you know, we're like Mandela, like, you know, we're loving it. We're talking, and you know, my mum sat there twitching. Gif is twitching. She's kind of like, I was like, "You all right, Gif?" She's like, and to give you a scope of Gif, I don't know if anyone remembers Police Academy, but my mum is the black woman with the small voice in Police Academy, but with a Ghanaian accent. So just keep that in mind, right? And if you're too young to know what Police Academy is, look it up, and that's my mum. And she looks exactly like her. And she says she's kind of itching and she's twitching, chomping at the bit. It's like, if you're right, she's like, can I ask you boys something? And she's like, yeah. She's like, how long was Nelson Mandela in prison for? So, you know, Joseph chips in. 27, Joseph's one of my brothers, like, 27 years, 5 years under house arrest. She's like, okay. She said, when you go to prison, what's the thing you lose? Simon chips in. Freedom, your liberties, I guess. And then she's like, okay. Like, do you know where Robben Island is? Yeah? What is Robben Island? It's a remote island. What was it? It was the most hostile prison in South Africa, and it's literally in the middle of the South African Ocean. It's like, right, okay. So Nelson doesn't have no liberties, he doesn't have no freedom, and he's in the middle of the ocean, an isolated island in South Africa. Who do you think was liberating a country for 27 years whilst he was behind bars? The boys all go quiet. We all look down. And Gowan pipes up and he's like, Winnie? Sorry, what was that? What was that again? Winnie, and then I pipe in, Zinzi, and she's like, right. And the point she was making was that there's this romanticisation about a lot of black male figures that is often driven by black female endeavour. And actually what history has done is often erode that contribution, which is a lot more significant, generally speaking, if we're being absolutely candid and honest, than the contribution of black men. So the point my mum ended with is that with black men, what they don't seem to always understand, and men generally speaking, is that a man without a neck is pretty headless. Their head's flopping all over the place. And what black women have always done is be the neck behind a black man. And it's really important that that isn't omitted from history and in all of the things that we do. And I guess that lesson was an interesting one, but it was at the catch point. It was just after I turned 16. It was early enough, it was late enough for me not to make the mistakes going into adulthood that maybe many other men have made in terms of how we think about black women and their contribution to the black male endeavour. And I was also old enough to understand, because I think if I hadn't had that episode with GIF, I think it would have been interesting, the continuation of habits that I might take into adulthood, and potentially, not intentionally, but the kind of violence we cause to black women more broadly in these spaces, and not just black men, men of colour, white people as well.
Fascinating story. We've got less than 10 minutes left now, and there's so much I'd love to be able to cover, and hopefully we'll be able to draw on some of that in the Q&A. But here you are, with catapults to so many years later, at least 25 years of time communicating now with people, and here you are, you know, in some ways, at a very high point of your life, and hopefully not the pinnacle. I'm sure there's much more to go, given that you are the youngest professor in the university. So, what's your view about where you find yourself now in a place like Cambridge, given all that you've had to contend with your own life?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. My life is very different to what it was 8 months ago. Very, very different.
8 months ago. In fact, yes, it very much is. I mean, 8 months ago, in fact, I was at Oxford and just running through my last few weeks, and there was somebody there who said, "Oh, you should meet Jason. He's a really good guy. I met him some time before," and we had a conversation literally for about an hour. And you hadn't given anyone the news that you're going to be coming to Cambridge, and we just had a conversation, and we said what we should do is we should meet up every month and just share notes. And we haven't spoken since then, because things really have changed for you. I mean, it must have been a whirlwind. So Tell me as briefly as you can how the last 8 months have been and
it
how
was-
your life has changed while you've been here.
I mean, it's probably easy to start from February. So you go to bed one night and you know, your contemporaries, and probably a lot of people in the community know what you do. And then you wake up and, you know, you look at your phone and literally you've got over 100 missed calls, you've got over 1,000 messages. And my dad, I remember I stayed with my mum and dad because I care for them, so I stayed with them that particular night. And my dad came in. He was like, "Jason," and I was like, "What?" He was like, "I came to this country 40 years ago. The chef's son who'd go on to become a press, like, this is my victory." He was like, and he's like, because sorry, to give you some context, I hadn't told him.
Ah,
So I got the job in November,
right.
and there was 4.5 months where there was only 2 people on this planet who knew. My mum, and my best friend Chantal, and 2 other people, one of my brothers and a friend. So there wasn't many people who knew.
Can I ask what that was about? Why you held back?
One, because I you know, what's really interesting is that having spent most of my life losing to win, I'm always very...
What was that term?
Having spent most of my life losing to win.
Losing to win.
Losing to win, yeah. So there's a line from a Kasabian song called Underdog. And I always understood how important it was to lose with good grace.
Mm-hmm.
And I always empathised with the person who was on the other end of the result.
Okay.
So the people that also applied for the job, a lot of my thinking was they will feel a huge sense of disappointment.
Okay.
And part of keeping it to myself is because, apart from anything else, that there is a humility that one must sit in recognising that you've worked hard, but you've been fortunate. There are people, particularly black and ethnic minority people, particularly black people actually, who are just as able, if not more capable and more deserving. And for some reason, you know, my fate laid in the lap of the gods and they smiled upon me.
Mm.
So the least you can do with that grace is to sit in humility. And that's what I tried to do. And obviously my dad coming in and saying it was his victory and it's all down to him. You let him have his moment. But then you also kind of think how surreal it must be for someone coming to what is effectively a pretty hostile country for, you know, for people from, particularly people from immigrant populations, and the idea that, you know, he could never have foreseen this potentially happening. And so for me, it was a pretty surreal thing because I remember I stayed at home for the first day, and then the next day I came out and I must have been stopped by, I'm not exaggerating, I must have been stopped by over 500 people.
On the way from home to...
On the way from home to wherever I was going to.
Wow.
And they were just like, just thank you for everything you've done. You're not a footballer, you're not a rapper, you're not a, you know, so, and already they just listed all these, like, you're ours. And what you've done is a reflection on all of us. And I didn't realise how much it meant to everyone. And as my friends all joke, you couldn't meet a more reluctant star because the only thing I ever wanted was a tailored shirt from Samurai. So, but with that, the thing that you kind of take away from that is, so I don't believe in imposter syndrome.
You don't?
And I don't believe in imposter syndrome because faith is, I walk in faith. And
What do you mean by that?
my faith is a huge part of who I am. So I believe that God places people where they're supposed to be. And I believe that for everybody.
Mm.
So there's never anything that comes in my mind that, oh, I don't know if I belong here or not. I think I was destined to be here.
Right. Can I ask you this then, that having that faith and that way of responding to the situation in which you find yourself in helps you to manage the let me put it this way, the burden, because this is a huge burden, 500 people on the way to work stop you after the first day after you've announced that you're going to be a professor. And you manage that very gracefully. And is that because you have the faith and the belief that's helped you to manage what is a huge pressure and burden?
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. I think a part of it is temperament.
Okay.
I think I've been very fortunate that I think I've been blessed with quite a good temperament. So, you know, I probably don't get too high and I don't get too low, which I try and stay in the middle, but I'm also not made of stone. You know, there is a very difficult side to it, and you know, restraint is a very underrated quality. It's a very underrated quality, when, particularly in the face of absolute provocation, racial provocation to be specific. To demonstrate restraint, the faith becomes an important thing, because what my faith teaches me is to try and show compassion and forgiveness. And so I come across people who say the most vile and wicked of things, but I have the capacity...
Are you able to say what sorts of things in the last couple of minutes? Am I right to say?
Do you know what? I could say it, but I don't want to give them the oxygen, because what's more important is that I forgive them and I love them. And if they ever came to my face and said to me what they think, I would try and engage in a teaching episode, and I would guesstimate that they may not have been shown what love is. And Simon spoke about that kind of proxy of love, and I would take that as an opportunity to demonstrate to them what love looks like, and that's what I would do. So I don't have no malice, I don't wish these people no ill, but my time at Cambridge will come to an end one day, but it won't be at their hand, it'll be at mine. And when I decide that the time is right, and like the All Blacks jersey, you're a custodian of the jersey. Your job as an All Black is to put it in a better condition than when you first received it. So there are some exceptional people in the audience tonight and probably online, and some of those people will take the charge and they will do a much better job than I have done, and then when their time is up, they'll move it on and someone else will take it. So the capacity to love is situated in faith, and my faith teaches me that two wrongs don't make a right. So where people show me hatred and they show something from within, I see it as an opportunity to strengthen my purpose around interweaving, you know, with needle and the thread as much as I'm able to, love into our society and how we engage with people. And that's how I will always be, because that's how I was brought up.
Amen to that. Jason Arday, thank you very much for spending time with me on the couch. Appreciate it. Thank you. Stay where you are. Okay, we've got just under 30 minutes. I think I'm right for Q&A. So we're just going to gather a couple of chairs up on the stage. So please give us a couple of minutes, and then I'll invite our guests back up on stage. Just give us 2 minutes, please. If you can start thinking about what questions you might ask, that would help too. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you. That's brilliant. Okay, if I can invite both George and Simon back on, please. Let's grab a seat. It's a lovely moment, you two. Okay, thank you very much for coming back in. Okay, so let's open the floor. If you could please give your name and ask your question as concisely as you can, and who it's directed to, and we'll take it from there. So who'd like to ask the first question? See a hand over there.
So can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Could you state your name and your question, please?
So my name is Yoel, and my question is about, for the three of you, the relationship between your academia and your mental health. There was a situation last week where I had a conversation with my white counterparts in my kitchen about philosophy for 2.5 hours. And I realized I was a nerd, but I liked it, and I was no longer fighting it. And I also recognized that having spent time in this institution and done my A-levels, the relationship I had with academia was very therapeutic, without me knowing it was therapeutic. And I guess for the three of you, how did you find your relationship with your intellectual developments, and how that impacted your mental health?
Thank you for that. Good question. Who'd like to answer that one first?
In some ways, mine didn't come naturally to me. So I had no intellectual academic acumen whatsoever. It was a case of, Simon and George, they got one-hit quitters. In other words, in boxing terms, they can get their opponent out in 2 or 3 rounds, whereas me, I'm punch drunk. I'm a 12-round fighter. I've taken too many blows to the head, and I find it really difficult. So I wouldn't, cathartic or therapeutic is not necessarily what I would say. So it's always been this act of suffering, because I find it really difficult. But the perverse love of suffering is that you can begin to find love for it. And so I wouldn't, from a mental health point of view, when I became a professor, when I was 35 at Glasgow, it was almost, the suffering can come to an end. You can begin to enjoy it now. And I guess I've only really had 2 or 3 years now beginning to think about it in a different way. And so maybe I'll be where you are, hopefully sometime soon. And if you can think of it like that, as a cathartic thing, hold on to that. Try to ensure that you don't let anything infringe upon that, because this might sound like a crazy thing to say, but I don't really like research. I find it difficult. Being an academic is really, really difficult. And I say that because effectively I'm exploring the phenomena of race and racism. And the difficult thing is listening to people talk about these really painful experiences of experiencing racism, and then you've got to encapsulate that voice and provide something that is legible and digestible, and that side of it is difficult. So if you can find the enjoyment of it, try not to lose that almost childlike enthusiasm, because it once you lose it, it's a hard thing to get back. And sometimes I think about when I started 10 years ago and where I am now, and you lose the enthusiasm because these painful experiences, not necessarily, I've encountered them, but you hear, when you interview over 600 people of colour and they tell you all of their experiences around racism, you're green when you first start, you're wet behind the ears, and then your ears begin to dry and that green turns to red because you become really angry about what people are experiencing, and it's different.
That's a very useful response. Thank you, Jason. Let me just ask you this then, because as a therapist, we sometimes operate as a container for the pain that our clients bring us. But we have to find ways of being able to let go of that or release that, whether that's via clinical supervision or also as well via well-being related activity. Very briefly then, is there anything more that you do to mind your own well-being in relation to the question I was asked?
Yeah, it comes back to this idea of, I always write in my work, this idea of anger being privilege. So who is allowed to express annoyance, anger, upset, anguish? And I guess the thing that I do, which I'm a cautionary tale, it's nothing to be proud of, you kind of learn to be a robot. So you manage emotion, the most I would do is put my head under a pillow and scream. And even to do that, I'd make sure there was no one in the house. So it's not particularly anything to be proud of, because you understand that actually I have to be softly spoken, I have to have soft shoulders, try not to raise my voice, try and keep my hands below my pelvis. There's so many algorithms you have to do to engage as a black man, so you don't be awarded the moniker of being aggressive or angry or violent. So, a lot of the things that I do, if I'm going to be honest, what I'm about to tell you is a really silly thing, but it's what I personally do. So I love Home and Away and Neighbours. And it's so disconnected to what my reality is. I deliberately try and engage in things that are completely, because I'm never going to go to Australia. I've got really no interest in these people other than the fact that it's just so different from what my norm is. So everyone has the things that they do. The tailoring's a big thing. If I'm being honest, it's my obsession. So that's probably a big part of it as well.
Thank you, Jason. Simon, George, would you like to respond to the question?
Earlier in my life, my academic career was tied up in a lot of anxiety. The exam cycle I found to be quite stressful, but the reward afterwards, when I felt like I'd made progress, was a big boost. And I think the cumulative reward of all of that progress became my fundamental expectation of academia. If you apply yourself, you will grow. And that's where I'm at now. A lot of my, even though I'm a poet, a lot of my work now, especially in the form of my podcast, is quite academic. It's become more and more research focused as I've pursued my PhD. And it's cathartic because I'm talking about things on a deeper level than I ever have. And because I'm able to share this with people, make it accessible. It doesn't just, it's no longer a closed loop of sitting in a room, writing an essay, only to do it next week. There's an output that I think is meaningful, and that's quite rewarding.
That's brilliant. I think we'll take another question from the floor, and then we'll take one of those that have come from online. So who'd like to go next? I can see your hand here. If you can say your name, if you don't mind.
Sorry, my name is Aisha.
Hi, Aisha.
Thank you all for sharing so openly today. I have a question for each of you. I'm sorry to take some time. I suppose we look at anger as a negative thing, but essentially I think a lot of the literature that's coming out, particularly in the activist space, is essentially anger often drives us. So my question to Simon in particular is there any way that you can frame it as a positive and reflect on actually how that's driven you to do the work that you do? And in the trauma that you've experienced, is there any reflection on potentially the work that you do being therapeutic to you? Question for Jason. So you said something quite powerful there, is you were thanked over 500 times and you were seen as you were representing a community. So on the other side of that, particularly for students that might be in an institution like this where they are seen as achieving something exceptional, how do you find a balance to not overwork because of the expectation that's been placed on you? Just thinking about the students' mental health. And one for you, George, it's a big one here, but particularly maybe because you've come from that more working class environment and you are seeing, in a space like this to have broken almost every sort of trajectory that was planned for you. I guess the question is, when we think about contextualization, talking to the young black boys and young black girls that would be listening to this podcast, and knowing how much, especially when you talk about affirmative action rollbacks in the US and, contextualization offers here, and how actually, I believe it's a good thing, but actually how do you speak to those young black students that might be faced with questions in terms of their validity in being in a space like this, and just speaking into them in a way that, I suppose the questions that you definitely would have asked yourself about your right to be here.
Okay, thank you for those 3 questions. If you can respond to those as briefly as you possibly can. And Simon, I'd like to start with you. This question related to anger, if possible.
It's great channeling anger, because I think it's okay to be angry, to be frustrated, to be impatient, but how you channel that is the gift. And sometimes you'll see the fruits of your labor. Tonight, I'm seeing the fruits of my labor. I've known George when we started Operation Black Vote. OBV was 25, nearly 30 years ago. And George was an up-and-coming poet. And I'm not sure who got in touch with who, but we got in touch with each other. And he came to London, and he would join some of our events, and we would give him a platform, and he would have this political dexterity and musicality and passion that just blew everybody away. I mean, he wasn't well known then. And then I'm seeing him now, and he's a superstar, and a reluctant superstar, because it's about what he does rather than his ego. And on my left, Jason came to Operation Black Vote 15 or so years ago, And he came to me and he said, Simon, I want to change the world. And I said, hop on board. And I remember it'd been with us for a year, and there was a BBC interview, and they wanted somebody, and he knows what I'm going to say, and he was like, no, I can't do it. I looked him in the eyes, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And he just hit the ball out of the park. And then to see this young man who was as nervous as hell, to be the beacon, I mean, that's how you turn anger into hope, into reality, these two guys. And I didn't even know that you were going to put us all together. But that golden thread, and there's another golden thread too. We're all council house kids. We're all from the council estate, punching above our weight.
Simon, before I move on to George, one thing you're very brilliant at doing also as well is praising others and pointing to others and their achievements, and the question was necessarily directed to you. Now, I remember, and I think it's in your book, that when you, well, it certainly was the same for me, first saw the program Roots, that stirred up a lot of anger. It certainly did for me. And look, what me and my brethren wanted to do was beat up the first white person we saw for all those years of slavery, but we managed to contain our anger. I guess the question is, how have you managed, if I'm interpreting properly what you're saying, all that you've come across, which would make anyone angry, black or white, and still able to come to where you are? And this is a question directly for you and how you manage that situation.
I mean, it's hope. It's hope in humanity, hope how things can be. And I think Jason has said, look, we go through life thinking, if I give you, at some point you'll respond well to me and with me. And that having anger into toxicity is like a cancer, really. I mean, it's going to destroy you. I refuse to be destroyed.
That's great, thank you. George, you want to respond to the question that's directly at you? Would you like it repeated, or are you cool?
What do I say to a young person that might struggle with the imposter syndrome in a place like this, in the context of affirmative action, etc.? I would say that there's, first of all, intrinsic value in who you are, which it took me a while to wrap my head around that. I always thought you had to earn the right to be heard. You don't. However, how you address yourself to whatever challenge you take on, if it's an academic aspiration, if it's a physical goal, how you address yourself to that then becomes your qualification. You know, did you show up? Are you serious? Have you been consistent? Are you willing to learn, humble yourself, fall back, pivot where possible? These are things that take a Jason, you know, from not being able to speak for 10 years, 11 years, to becoming Cambridge's youngest professor. Jason described not being a knockout artist, if you know, in a boxing analogy, having to slug it out in terms of you know, the nitty-gritty of academia. And that's what life really is. There are people who have attained everything material, but now are going through that struggle in their marriage or with their child. And they're not going to get an award or a trophy for whatever struggle they go through, but they will be transformed by how they address themselves to that challenge.
That's great, thank you, George. And the question for you, Jason, would you like that repeated, or you?
I sit and I've embarrassed myself, can't even remember.
Oh, right, okay. Very briefly, if you can repeat the question again.
How do you not overwork with the expectation that's placed on you from the community more widely?
Thank you so much.
It's a very
Aisha.
good question as well.
Thank you so much.
Not overburdening yourself, maybe not overwork.
You can't change the habit of a lifetime. Unfortunately, this is the DNA of Jason Arday. I'm going to run it until the wheels fall off, and then I'll deal with that problem when it comes. And that's what I mean. I'm the cautionary tale of, you don't become a professor the age I do if you haven't, you know, there's a lot of things. Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid says balance makes good karate. And the one thing I've never had in my adult life is balance. And if you have balance, you can enjoy it. Part of the reason why I don't always enjoy it is because I don't balance things very well. And that's me being as honest as I could be. And if you really want to be happy, if you really want to embrace this, I don't think it's mythical. I think happiness really exists. I think balance is very important. And the cautionary tale is, I've chased fool's gold, but if someone asked me, except for making other people happy, are you happy? I would say no, because you're tired. And actually, part of being in this space is you'd think you'd enjoy it, but you're tired because balance is so important. And the thing I would say to people is, with balance, as Mr. Miyagi says, you'll have good karate, Daniel-san. If you don't have good balance, you don't have good karate. So that's what I would always say. And that's why I know that this won't last forever. It's not everything. And I know that, I don't want to put it in years, but I probably haven't got long left. Because if you burn the candle that hard from the age of 21 to 38, you're just not going to be able to, but I hope that the little I've done has moved that All Blacks jersey on some way.
That's great. Thank you. I think I'll take a question from online, and this came from Valcal, and this one's for you, Simon. How can you overcome subtle racism when applying for senior roles? Now, your brilliance, as I was saying already, at assisting and supporting the black students that come to Hobbiton and to Cambridge, actually. I mean, it's fantastic what you've done, particularly online in showing your support for that. But the question is, how can you overcome subtle racism when applying for senior roles in this country?
Yeah. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed nurturing talent. There's two other people in the audience from Operation Black Vote, two sisters. And it's just great because honestly, somebody told me as a parent, as a new parent, they said, it's not rocket science. You give 10% with a child and you get 100% back. And it's not too undissimilar when you're nurturing talent. But nurturing talent to go through barriers and obstacles, I honestly felt that I had to do it myself too, to know that lived experience. And before I got this job, I was headhunted for a job in Oxford. I won't mention the college, unless you buy me a drink afterwards. Anyway, the process was 6 months and about 15 interviews. And I was down to the last 2. When you get down to the last 2, you've got to think, you've got to start believing it, right? I was doing the measurements in the house, or almost. And then I got the call and said, yeah, you were close, but. And I tell you, it was like a hammer blow. And I slumped and started to question myself. Actually, you know what got me out of it? When the person arrived, they said, I'm coming back home. And so they'd been there and they'd knew them. And so, it was an easier option. And then I thought to myself, you know what? I can't win this beauty contest. Right now with... But this is, love that. I paid him to come in right at that time. Against these young guys too, eh? But I said to myself, if I'm to nurture talent like these women in front of us, if I'm to tell them, when you get knocked down, you got to get back up, brush yourself down. I said, in my head, I'm thinking I can't win this beauty contest, but I need to keep trying so I can tell others. And so when Hobbiton came knocking on the door, I said, okay, I'm going to try one more time. I'm going to try. I'm going to put myself out there. 6 months, 6-month interview process, all online. And then I got the call. You know what they said? It was unanimous. I said, damn, time to work.
Thank you for that. Right, I did see a hand over here, so if we can take that, and then I see one other person over there, and we might have to end then. Your name, please, and then the question.
Thank you. My name's Tony. My question is, I guess, listening to all of you, what's the end game as black men, both individually and communally? You've all talked about success, both your journeys to and interpretations of, but they're very different. Lord Wooley talked about putting personal pain aside to get to success so he could have a platform to make a difference. George talked about not kind of getting distracted by Eurocentric conceptions of success and proximity to white capital, etc. And then not to do a disservice to the professor, but he talked about just wanting a tailored shirt and has over-exceeded by all expectations. So as black men, what should we be striving for and how do we define that for ourselves?
That's a great question, thank you. And George, being the youngest on the panel, what's the end game?
I think preparation of the next generation, that must be the end game, even if you're not going to become a parent yourself. It's why Simon has such fulfillment in his work, in being here, in seeing his mentees in the audience. The next generation is constantly incoming, and they are constantly in need of support beyond what the institutions provide for them. So I again, going back to my psyche, being a big brother, I just need to know that through my own progress, at the end of this journey, I have little brothers and sisters who feel a little more confident in how they're going to navigate and look at the efforts I made to give them some game, and they pay it forward to the next generation.
Thank you, George. Jason, over to you.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that kind of altruistic 18-year-old. You know, when I was 18, the most seminal thing that happened to me was my mum took me to a homeless shelter when I was 18. And from that experience, I knew exactly what I wanted to do besides having a tailored shirt. I wanted to save the world, and it's what I said to Simon when I met him, you know, several years later. And part of that was that I wanted to raise as much money as I could for charity, and I wanted to help as many people as possible. And by the grace of God, I've been very fortunate to be able to raise millions for charity, but it's really a continuation of that. And really, again, it's about that All Blacks jersey, and you know, the amazing work that George has done, the amazing work that Simon has done, and others, and great people like yourself as well, Rotimi, and kind of really continuing that legacy and that black tradition, and leaving the jersey in a better condition than when we found it for the next custodians to take it on board. And it always comes back to that kind of All Blacks mantra, which I use the All Blacks as an exemplar because I think they're probably the best sporting franchise ever, one of the oldest, over a century old. And I think everything that embodies that Māori culture is something that has actually been extracted in many respects from Indigenous culture, black culture, and it's all embodied in this jersey. But it's a good metaphor for how we all look to move things forward. And there's always, it's almost like in a relay. Hand, button, and it'll be someone else's turn, and you kind of shoot off.
That's brilliant. And yourself, Simon, I mean, having been instrumental in developing Operation Black Vote and getting many people to vote when they would never have done that before, entering the House of Lords as a black man, and now here we are being the principal, the first black male principal of Oxbridge College. What more is there to do?
I mean, I'm happy with the life of struggle I am challenging institutions, transforming institutions. I mean, that is a life worth lived. But trust me on this one, you have to have joy. Honestly, please don't ignore joy for the worthy endeavor of struggle. We had joy last week. We had our Black History Month dinner, and in our big fancy dining hall, we had 300 majority students of African descent. And
as many as that here at Cambridge.
There is. And showcased fashion icon and super sister Naomi Campbell. Let me tell you, there was so much joy in that room. So much joy of being black, so much joy of being happy together. I'm thinking to myself, I could retire right now. And here's the thing about it, is that Naomi Campbell hasn't always been in places of joyous, but she was joyful on that day and embraced it. The manager wanted her to leave. She wouldn't leave because she knew the sisters wanted a picture with her, so she had pictures with everyone. Joy. And the other bit of joy, I'm a bit like my brother here. We work hard, but we like to look good. And the sisters too. Don't. You see, Savile Row shoes. Savile Row blue suede shoes in the house.
You know what's really funny? I remember the first time I saw Simon in a roll neck, and I was like, he's wearing a roll neck? I'm going to wear a I remember hugging him. I was like, oh, he smells unbelievable.
That's fantastic.
So does George, by the way.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Simon. I think we've probably got time for just one more question, and I did see a hand up over there. So just at the back there.
Yeah, hi. My name is Sean, and my question is to Simon. I've written it down because it's a bit loaded, but yeah. So in your position as principal of Homerton College, you've been able to accommodate people from your community in like really heartwarming and commendable ways. And obviously the dinner last week was testament to that. Yeah, shout out Naomi Camel again. Yeah, however, I am curious what goes through your mind and guides your steps when your identity inevitably comes into conflict with your position and responsibilities to a wider institution that obviously includes people beyond.
It's a fascinating question.
It's a great question. And it's constantly, I mean, these two brothers will know too, it's a high wire act. That first and foremost, I have to be true to myself. And once I lose that, I've lost the game. I'm not worthy of being in this space. But I also know that to move the dial, I have to compromise. I have to play the game. I'm as frustrated as hell because I see so much potential in these institutions. You know, one of the things we talked about education and how important it is, and the brothers know how important it is, that I'm of the Dr. Martin Luther King school of thought, that academic excellence without character of the individual is almost worthless. Because you can take that intelligence and get puffed up and be a shocker, an absolute shocker. That my privilege and my gift that I'm trying to do for Homerton and for Cambridge is to say, I want you to have the academic excellence. I want you to have that Willy Wonka golden ticket, but I want more than that. I want to nurture your character, so it's not about you, but about what you can do, and about how you can take that gift and that learning and do extraordinary things. And I'm in the hot seat. Watch this space.
Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you so much, three of you. I mean, it's fantastic that you've come through the system here at Cambridge and are who you are. So thank you so much, George the Poet. Thank you so much, Lord Simon Woolley, and thank you so much, Jason Arday. Thank you all. And thank you very much for coming, everyone. Thank you. Right, I think we'll probably be around for a few more minutes. So George's book is outside. If you wanted to purchase one, I'm sure he'll be willing to sign a copy or so. If you've got any questions that you want to ask quite privately, either of myself or other guests, I think we'll hang around for a few more minutes. There might still be some more refreshments outside, so we'll be around for a few more minutes. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you. That was great.